Can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ashby. Councillor Askew. Councillor Attewell. Councillor Bambridge.
Here.
Councillor Burt. Councillor Borrett.
Present.
Councillor Bowles. Councillor Brame.
Here.
Councillor Brindle. Councillor Bushell. Councillor Marion Chapman-Allen. Councillor Sam Chapman-Allen.
Here.
Councillor Clark. Councillor Clausen.
Here.
Councillor Coleman. Councillor Cowan.
Here.
Councillor Crane. Councillor Dale. Councillor Dowling. Councillor Duffield. Councillor Dygan.
Here.
Councillor Eagle. Councillor Gilbert.
Here.
Councillor Gray. Councillor Hambidge.
Present.
Councillor Harvey.
Present.
Councillor Hewitt.
Here.
Councillor James. Councillor Jeremy.
Here.
Councillor Cadell. Councillor Kiddle Morris. Councillor Kybird.
Yeah.
Councillor Martin.
Here.
Councillor Monument. Councillor Morton.
Here.
Councillor Nairn.
Here.
Councillor Nunn.
Morning.
Councillor Oliver. Councillor Plummer.
Here.
Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Suggett. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Terry. Councillor Turner. Councillor Webb. Councillor Wickerson. Councillor Wilkin
Here.
and Councillor Wilkinson.
Here.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, moving on to item 1, apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillors Attewell, Councillor Bowes, Councillor Clark, Councillor Eagle, Councillor Kiddle Morris, Councillor Monument, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Wickerson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've got apologies for Councillor Ashby, Councillor Askew, Councillor Dale, Councillor Gray and Councillor Sherwood, please.
Councillor Jeremy.
Okay, sorry, apologies from Councillor Brindle and Councillor Dowling, please.
All in favour, any against? Right, do members have any interest to declare on anything on the agenda? Thank you. Moving on to item 4, Chairman's announcements. Firstly, I would like to welcome 6 work experience students who are with us today from the local high schools, some of whom are watching this meeting this morning. During my year in office, I have chosen to support the charities of Papyrus and Mind. Tim Owen from Three Dads Walking has kindly agreed to join us together, and Tim lives in West Norfolk and forms 1/3 of the Three Dads Walking, along with 2 other gentlemen, Mike Palmer and Andy Airy. Together, these farmers fundraise for Papyrus, a UK charity dedicated to the prevention of suicide and the promotion of positive mental health and emotional well-being in young people. I'd like to welcome Tim up the front so that he can give you a further insight into Three Dads Walking and the Papyrus relationship.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to come and give you an overview of Three Dads Walking. It's a real privilege to be here, and thank you for supporting Papyrus. And as you'll hear, it's such a life-saving charity. How did the Three Dads Walking form? Tragically, at the start of lockdown on the 18th of March 2020, my 19-year-old daughter decided she couldn't be here with us anymore and tried to take her own life. She died 5 days later in the QE hospital in Kings Lynn. Devastated as a family, we didn't know where to turn. My eldest daughter eventually reached out to Mike from Manchester. That's how I always remember him. Mike's daughter Beth, 17, a very talented musician, took her own life 5 days later, 5 days after him. His family were in absolute despair as well. So through the power of social media, Mike and I started to talk to each other about a month after our two teenage girls had taken their own lives, questioning everything about what we knew, why we'd done stuff as parents. And Mike started to go on some courses with the charity Papyrus that you're kindly supporting. And it was at that point that we learned that suicide is the biggest killer of under 35s in the UK, and over 200 school children take their lives every year in the UK. We were absolutely flabbergasted by these statistics. And there's more statistics out there from mine, from Samaritans, but they really hit us hard. Through Papyrus, Mike met somebody called Andy from Cumbria, and Andy's daughter, Sophie, she was a bit older, she was 29, and she'd died 14 months, she'd taken her own life 14 months ahead of Emily and Beth. And so Andy was that little bit further down the journey than us, and we all felt as though we wanted to do something positive. And Mike is a bit of an outdoor type, he's rode the Atlantic before, and he said, why don't we walk between our three homes? And that's how Three Dads Walking. We're going to walk from Cumbria to Manchester to Norfolk to raise a little bit of money. So it's 3 dads, 3 homes, 300 miles, and we'll try and raise £3,000 each, lots of threes, but keep it very, very simple. And that's where we were going. And we met for the first time in July last year, and then the BBC got into us, BBC Breakfast. And we were at about £9,000 when Mike went on BBC Breakfast on the 28th of September last year. By the end of BBC Breakfast, we're suddenly at £50,000, and the money's starting to go up. The day before we start to walk from Moorland in Cumbria, we had a donation from Daniel Craig. That was the first of several large donations, £10,000. Nicole Kidman followed, another £10,000. Lou Macari, an old Scotland and Man United footballer from the 1970s, £10,001, couldn't be beaten, so he gave us a bit more. And the money just started to roll in. And we started our walk, our adventure, on the 9th of October last year. And we walked 15 days, basically, the 300 miles from Cumbria to Manchester to West Norfolk, where I live. The money kept rolling in, but more importantly, as we walked, we were met by loads of people, suicide bereaved parents, brothers, sisters, people who'd lost parents years ago. And we all had the same story, but it all lost a loved one to suicide of some description. And no one was talking about it apart from to us. So that was our whole point, was to try and raise that suicide awareness. We didn't know, nobody knew that suicide was the biggest killer of our young people. And very few people had heard about this charity, Papyrus. And the key thing about Papyrus is it runs a support line called Hope Line UK that's open at the moment from 9 in the morning till midnight. And that's available for any of us to call about kids, grandkids, if we're concerned that they're going to take their own lives. But equally, those loved ones, our young people, can phone Hope Line UK. It's manned, it's staffed by professional suicide prevention counsellors, so not volunteers. So each call costs £5 to run. So hence the need to raise money for this charity. But it's also about education, and Papyrus have got a lot of staff that go into schools and talk about suicide prevention. And that's the key thing for us. If this is the biggest killer to our young kids, it kills more people than terrorism, it kills more people than knife crime, it kills more people than drugs, it kills more people than road accidents. Why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we talking about it to our young kids? So we've written to the government a bit, and we have been quite successful until what's happening at the moment. But we met Gillian Keegan, who's the minister. She's got suicide prevention on her portfolio. She was lovely. 2 weeks ago, we met Sajid Javid, who launched the national suicide prevention policy. He lost his brother to suicide 4 years ago, so he's got a real personal interest in it. Tragic, you know, he's resigned, which is a nightmare, but hopefully the Department for Health will keep going. Next week, we're meeting Department for Education, with a view to trying to get suicide prevention put into the children's or school curriculum. If our kids at school get taught about knife crime, drugs, etc., why don't we talk about suicide and trying to save them? So what we've done, we've raised £880,000 so far. Money is still coming in, which is fantastic, through people supporting us and supporting Papyrus. We're meeting these kind of key people, key influences, key decision makers in government. We're continuing to raise awareness through events like this and kind support that you're giving to Papyrus. We're going on another walk towards the end of the year, well, in September and October. We're going to cover all 4 countries of the UK, meeting other suicide-bereaved parents and continuing the suicide prevention message. We're determined to crack £1 million, desperate to crack £1 million. And we're going to walk from Northern Ireland to Edinburgh. With a bit of a flight in there as well, because you can't walk across the sea. Leave Edinburgh on World Suicide Prevention Day on the 10th of September, walk down to Cardiff, Cardiff across to London, and finish on College Green in Westminster on the 10th of October, which is World Mental Health Awareness Day. So kind of bookending the 2 walks. Find out more about us on 3 Dads Walking, just Google 3 Dads Walking. That'll give you a link to the Papyrus website as well. As I say, we're not a charity, we're just 3 dads. Everything we do goes into Papyrus to support their life-saving work. So thank you very much for supporting us and supporting the charity. It will save lives.
Thank you, Tim. My other charity is Mind, Norfolk and Waveney branch. And I hope that they will be able to give us a presentation at the next full council meeting. I'm also pleased to hear that officers have recently held a bake sale, raising £65 for my chosen charities. Thank you. Thank you very much. Did you save any for me? I'll be holding further fundraising events during my year, so please watch this space for further details. I would like to inform members that immediately after the meeting, there will be a presentation taking place by Jenny Keynes and Charlotte Watts from Norfolk Museum Service to talk about the environmental project that has been set up at Gressenhall Farm and Workhouse. This should last about 20 minutes. Finally, Thetford Town Council, we would like to thank you for the presentation of the football shirt, which has now been adopted by your football teams. So thank you very much. Thank you. And now moving on to item 5, leaders' announcements.
Lovely, thank you, Chairman. And I just want to pick up off where Tim Owen left off earlier with his really inspirational personal story, and where Breckland's Inspiring Communities programme is supporting organisations across Norfolk in relation to suicide prevention and suicide awareness. But there's so much more we can all do to be ambassadors in this area. And I know that the Council for our Inspiring Communities programme with Steve and Samantha are absolutely working in partnership. And I know through Councillor Wilkinson working with Breckland Yab that we're lifting that to the forefront of the priorities and activities across the county. And of course, the presentation from Thetford Town Football Club today of the women's strip of supporting the DAISY programme highlights once again that partnership work in both Dereham and Thetford Football Club are fantastic community organisations, and that ability to not just to change attitudes, but more importantly, engage with individuals, which organisations such as us and others have traditionally struggled to get those inroads, are fantastic accolades, and they are just the foundations of how we can move forward together as a council to support every single individual in our community. There are just 2 bits I want to pick up today, Chairman. Those members across the council will be aware we had our Local Government Association peer review some 3 weeks ago, and thank you to those members who engaged with that, and thanks to those across the district, both businesses, the third sector and other organisations and partners who engaged in that process. This is the sector supporting the sector, and it involves senior politicians and senior council officers from other councils across the country coming into our organisation to give that critical support, to hold up to that mirror, to recognise what the council is doing immensely well at, but also to look at where the council can look to improve or change how it operates or the activities it undertakes. Spoke to a number of members and officers and visited some phenomenal locations across the district, and they were immensely impressed with how enthusiastically partners engaged across the district with the council. While, Chairman, we are waiting for the formal report, and that will come to the council in due course, the peer team found that it was a really exciting period of change and progress for Breckland, where we've been over the last 2 years through the pandemic, but of course through our separation from South Holland, and how through the Chief Executive's leadership, that's been a really positive process. And myself and Maxine were most recently at the LGA conference, in which colleagues from across the country are asking how we managed to achieve that and still share services with other councils, not just in Norfolk, but across the Eastern region. It's a really encouraging process, and I'm sure that members will look forward to that coming to full council, then in turn on to over and scrutiny to look at the action plan as it comes forward. And Chairman, the final bit I want to talk about is accessibility improvements. And this is how residents interact with us as a council. Now, members sometimes will be frustrated as to how we report things online, and members quite rightly challenge us. Back in February 2020, out of 402 councils, we ranked 344th as to our accessibility, which is immensely low down that scale. I'm pleased to say, as of today, Chairman, we're in the top 9 councils across the whole of the country for how our digital platform allows residents to interact with us, report functions, communicate, engage. And that's through this council and all the committees of this and the commission of this council driving forward that transformation programme we looked back into latter part of 2019, and how we've continued to evolve, and through our Work Smart programme, Chairman, made sure that our services are accessible to all residents across the district. Chairman, it's a really short briefing today because I know that members are very short of time, but I'm happy to take any questions at item 7. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to item 6, and that's questions on notice, together with the responses are attached to this agenda on pages 19 and 25. Item 7. Any questions to be directed to the leader or relevant portfolio? Questions may be asked in the following order in accordance with Standing Order 7.2. The leader or deputy leader of the main opposition group may ask one question. Councillor Jeremy.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Sam. Thank you for your report. Sam, I wanted to ask you about isolation, because there's been a report produced in the last few weeks from the Department of Transport, and that's revealed that Breckland has topped the list in Norfolk for the most isolated neighbourhoods in terms of journey times to access key services. Say Antony ranked 43rd in England, and Mattershall wasn't far behind. I know in my own community of Thetford, having spoken to quite a few people over the last few weeks, that isolation and loneliness remains a major issue. Is Breckland Council doing enough to tackle this issue?
Thanks, Chairman. We're absolutely aware of the challenges our community faces, and I think the peer team, if I revert back to my leader statement, Chairman, highlighted the sheer geography and scale of the district and those 5 market towns and all of our fantastic parish communities. Obviously, through our Inspiring Communities programme, we've committed once again to continue that work for our Silver Social programme, supporting those most vulnerable residents and those who find themselves in isolation. And through the pandemic, we were able to form relationships and access residents who we hadn't historically been able to do or able to access before, and support them and enable other partners to support them as well. In relation to transport, we have got those challenges, and I'm pleased that Breckland was acknowledged through Councillor Coleman's work in getting funding down from DFT to support a community bus within the Greater Swaffham area and supporting those surrounding hinterlands. We continue to work with Norfolk County Council. They're just going out through the Levelling Up agenda around rural isolation and access to transport. It's not an issue residents in Norfolk face, it's an issue residents across the country face in rural communities. But through our outreach services and working in partnerships, we'll work within our current parameters of what we can achieve as a district council, while supporting our colleagues at the county council to make sure those who need those access to transport to get to key services, whether that's outreach and or medical, that continues as well.
In the absence of Councillor Atterwell and Wickerson from the independent group, is there anybody from the independent? Councillor. Yeah. Councillor Gilbert.
We're on now. All right, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to compliment the council on the Queen's Jubilee Green Canopy initiative, which saw several hundred trees planted on a Breckman-owned green open space in Watton. It will create a lovely wooded area when they are mature. However, unfortunately, about half of them are already dead. And those that are struggling to survive may well also die during the long hot period, which is what we are told to expect. They were planted at the wrong time of year, and it would seem that there was no maintenance plan to support them. Sam, will you give me an assurance that all dead trees will be replaced during this year's planting season with a maintenance plan in place to support them?
Yes.
Thanks, Chairman. So in relation to the trees at Heron Way and the issues raised by some of the district councillors and the town council, we have been out to visit those trees in question, Councillor Gilbert, with our contractors and our lead from the Woodland Trust. The Woodland Trust were our subject matter experts. We took our lead from them, and that's right and proper to do so. And they're confident that the current maintenance programme is fit for purpose, that the time was at the latter part of the planting season, but was still appropriate to do so. But as a whole, Breckland Council is absolutely committed to support our sustainability initiative with our tree planting programme, supporting the Woodland Trust of their rollout, Norfolk County Council, their tree programme, and of course, the Jubilee Green Canopy as well. You'll be aware through your work and your loved allotment that when we are planting new trees, there is an attrition, and we do expect that. But what I don't expect across other parts of the district where we've planted hundreds of trees, for them trees to be removed and vandalised, which has taken place in other market towns, which is immensely disappointing. But we will continue to work with the town council and update them. And we have written to the town clerk and all councillors at Watton Town Council and yourself to make you aware of the issues you have raised and the acknowledgement from the Woodland Trust and our contractors that what was asked for has been delivered to date.
For a start, I haven't received any communication about this, but I asked a question which I haven't had an answer to. Can I have an assurance that the dead trees will be replaced in the coming planting season? The trees do die. We all know that. There is always some attrition. But for almost about half of them to have died already, and I do know because I've been up there and looked at them, and I do know what a dead stick looks like. And can I have an assurance that they will be replaced so that this will become a very nice area with a lovely woodland? Thank you.
Sorry, trouble with the button. Absolutely, Chairman. And Councillor Gilbert, you don't need to ask a question at full council to give that reassurance. You can write to me at any point, or Councillor Sherwood, and we'll give you that assurance. And just a call to all members, if you have any locations within your wards where you would like tree planting to take place, and we as the Breckland District Council are not the landowners, we will work in partnership with those landowners to plant trees. So absolutely, Councillor Gilbert, not just in your location, but as I said earlier, those locations where those trees have been vandalised and removed, we will absolutely undertake new tree planting when it's appropriate to do so, in line with the recommendations and advice from the Woodland Trust.
Councillor Burt.
There we go. That's a registration problem with the mic. Okay, I've got a few questions, please, Chairman. Hopefully I'll be able to get through more than the first one I've got here. So,
could I remind you, Mr. Burt, or Councillor Burt, it's one question, please.
I am going to start with question one. Last time I attempted to ask a question about a council asset without actually naming it, and my question was blocked. You'll see that on page 10 of the agenda today. This time I can be a little more specific. As the Information Commissioner's Office have published their decision notice of a case I started nearly 18 months ago. Got a copy of the report here. Camera's not working. They have found that this council has breached regulations in both the Freedom of Information Act and the Environmental Information.
So apologies, Councillor Burt. We as a council have a set period of time in which to consider the opinion of the ICO, and currently we are taking council's opinion on it, so it's not appropriate to discuss it in this forum. No.
Councillor Burt, have you got another question?
I'll go on to question 2 then, shall I? So for years, I've objected to this council excluding press and public at meetings. I've not had objected every time, because sometimes I do recognise that there is a reasonable reason for so doing, but very often I've not seen any justification. Now, on the basis that the Information Commissioner has found that this council has applied general exceptions of withholding information, will this council review those exclusions of press and public and publish any information not legitimately and fully justified, for example, in blanket commercial confidentiality claims?
The ICO decision relates specifically to one matter and one query. And it's not appropriate to consider all of the other matters, because I think it would take quite a while. All the previous decisions are made by council and by members, and it's completely not appropriate to reconsider them, and it's not, and we don't need to. The decision from the ICO relates to one specific matter, as I've said. And indeed, as I've said before, we are also considering it and taking council's opinion on it.
So, Sam, are you going to consider it or not?
Chairman, thanks for the opportunity to speak. So obviously the item 7 is questions to myself or my relevant cabinet members. As you've heard from the advice from the council solicitor and head of legal, we as a council are unable to comment around the ICO report, Councillor Burt. So until that takes place, I can't comment any further until we've had council's opinion. So if you have any other questions in relation to the ICO, which you may ask me or other cabinet members, I'm afraid in this form I cannot respond further until we've had council's opinion. So in relation to your secondary question, my same statement still stands.
Have any other members got questions? Hamling, Tyburn. Crane. Going. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a planning question to Councillor Suggett. Brecon had an initiative to call for sites for potential planning applications to help residents across the district. That's now closed. Could I have a response? Did we have a good response? And would you happen to have any numbers today for us, please?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Yes, we did have a good response. We had about 360 responses come back with a mixture of residential and economic and the green spaces. There is a briefing taking place tomorrow, which will include a bit more information on this. So anybody who would like to hear a bit more, it's still in the raw data format, but tomorrow afternoon in this room at 3:30, I would welcome anybody who would like to know any more to join us here, and we can discuss it a bit further. Thank you.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is for Councillor Webb. And it seems even more apt now, having heard the presentation from the three dads. Those of us who are lucky enough in the rural community to work with the food bus that comes on a regular basis I just want to applaud the effect of such a service. And my colleague, Councillor Hewitt, and I can share with you very quickly a story of one young man who has not only attended the food bus, but has looked to us for help with mental health and other issues. And he said yesterday, if this wasn't here, I wouldn't be. You have saved my life. Now, to me, that's what all this is about. I know I can't put you on the spot, but could you please guarantee to at least try to keep the service going once the pilot year is finished? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Right, okay, so thank you for those wonderful comments about the food bus. Kickstart are running the food bus at the moment, and it's a paid service, which we are obviously contributing to, working alongside with other ones like Norfolk Community Foundation. This has been one of the flagship projects for us, and it's proved amazingly successful. So I cannot see that working forward, there should be any reason why it shouldn't continue. I've had feedback, positive feedback from lots and lots of councillors on this, including Councillor Wilson, Casimir, and far too many to actually go through, otherwise we'd be here all day. But what is important is the amount of households which we're helping to actually, with their food challenge at the moment, which we all recognise. We've had 206 households sign up to the membership. That's 619 Breckland residents being supported by us. The statistics show that 27% of them are employed, 34% of them are unemployed, 33% of them retired, and the remaining 6% are self-employed. So you can see that this service stretches across a wide range of individuals who are helping, requesting help. Finally, I'd like to say that at the Norfolk show, I think it was last week or the week before, there were a lot of people who said that the food bus was a wonderful thing and it should really be recognised as best practice. So I am, really, really pleased with how things are going. Thank you for the question.
Councillor Crane.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question, please, for Councillor Cowan regarding the council tax energy payments. Could you give some advice or some update on how the payments are going, please?
Thank you, Councillor Crane. And yes, I'm delighted to do this. I know in the press of late there's been commentary about some sort of slowness in some local authorities to dispense the £150 council tax rebate related to the energy costs. But I am delighted to say that working with our partners at ARP, we so far have paid out in cash £6.9 million to about 46,000 households. That represents about 86% of eligible residents in the district. Now, not everyone was able to get that initial tranche of payment because it related specifically to those who paid by direct debit. That was easy to do. We could credit bank accounts. So there were a number of others for whom that payment was not made initially. So there's about 7,000 residents who haven't been able to claim in that way, but they have all had the £150 rebate credited to their council tax account. And as and when they're able to demonstrate that they are entitled to it, then that will be deducted from their next council tax bill. So that means that the scheme is complete and every eligible resident has either been paid or received the credit against their bill. The initial requirement from government was that needed to be finalised by September, and we're well ahead of that curve. I think it was a good decision rather than wait and drag it out through the summer to dispense that money as quickly as possible to as many people as possible, and that has been successful. So residents with a credit on their bill can claim for the refund, and we've already received refund requests and continue to process those, as you might imagine, as a priority. So my thanks go out to ARP and the finance team who've taken that initiative And bear in mind, this isn't just about Breckland, it's about ARP working with our other partner authorities. Thank you, Chairman.
I think you mean Hambridge. Well, I hope you did. Anyway. No, I won't. This is a question for Councillor Webb. The Breckland Inspiring Communities Match Funding Scheme opened earlier this year and saw another annual contribution of £120,000 by Breckland Council to support local community groups to address identified local need. As the deadline for the application was closed on the 17th of June, could you let us know if there have been many applications and when the groups that applied may find out whether they've been successful or not?
Thank you, Councillor Hambridge. Got it right. As you know, Breckland has a long and proud history of supporting community groups through the delivery of match funding. And this year, it does indeed see a further £120,000 to support this. In this first funding round, we have received 9 applications totaling just over £28,000. These applications are in the process of being reviewed by the Norfolk Community Foundation, who administer the scheme on our behalf. The results will be known and made aware to everyone over the next few weeks, sooner rather than later, we're hoping. Finally, the scheme will reopen within the next funding round deadline being this Friday, the 16th of September. So please remember to tell your community groups that this is when it's reopening again, Friday, the 16th of September. All details of this scheme can be found on the Norfolk Community Foundation website. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kybert.
Thank you, Chairman. A question for Phil Cowan. What progress is being made with the council tax discretionary support scheme? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kybert. It's a bit of a theme, really. Council tax is clearly very important to many people at this time, particularly given the constrained circumstances that an awful lot of our residents find themselves in. You will be aware, members will be aware, that we do have an approved scheme in place, and that ARP, who, as we've already identified, actually supply and provide our benefits service, work with Capita, not our planning Capita, but Capita nationally, who provide all the software in order to manage such schemes. And they're currently working with them to test the functionality of the particular scheme to ensure the process will run correctly and there won't be any errors made. Information to date suggests that that is going to run smoothly, and provided over the next 10 days nothing untoward happens, the scheme will start to issue automatic allocations week commencing the 18th of July. And then as you heard about our accessibility, from the 25th of July, we should be getting the forms online, which will enable many more residents to access those for whom the system and the process perhaps has not been relevant in the past. So I am pleased to say that it is functioning. It will start dispensing automatic payments, and members of the public can access our systems online towards the end of this month. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman-Allen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a question for Councillor Webb. Councillor Webb, have we had many responses to the Queen's Platinum Bursary scheme? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, right, okay. The Queen's Platinum Jubilee Bursary scheme offered grants for £1,000 to individuals who might otherwise struggle to access further education for reasons such as low income, care leave, health status or vulnerability. The bursary scheme applies to students studying a formal qualification subjects that provide a contribution to enhance Breckland communities. This could be by improving well-being or enriching the environment. The bursary scheme will run for the duration of the Jubilee year, according to the funding budget we have, and will be open to students who have a placement agreed be enrolled on already attending a course. So update on the applications so far. So we have received 14 applications. 5 of them have been successful, and unfortunately 9 of them were not recommended as they didn't meet the criteria. So the scheme is still up and running. Please encourage people to come forward. We will be contacting the individuals, all the applicants, whether they were successful or not, tomorrow, during the day tomorrow. So thank you very much for the question. Thank you.
Councillor Digan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question for Councillor Paul Hewitt. 31 High Street, Dereham has recently been leased by the council to the Benjamin Foundation. Does this include the accommodation at the back previously occupied by the two Miss Bonds sisters, who were, let's say, legendary Dereham figures?
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. The answer is yes, it does. And I suspect that the Bond sisters will be delighted that what was a building that was left over from the High Street development is now being put to good use. The Benjamin Foundation, a local charity, a charity that provides hope, opportunity, stability and independence to children and young people who are facing challenges. The building will come into use as part of the Benjamin Foundation's Future Builders Project, looking to provide the opportunity to learn construction skills, property renovation, and at the same time give training, hopefully to gain an apprenticeship or full-time work as a result. We're absolutely thrilled as a council that the Benjamin Foundation, such an important local charity, has approached us. We're delighted to be working with them over the next 7 years or so.
Councillor Borrett, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the leader agree with me that the decision to bring in an external team of peers to look at Breckland's processes was not only brave, but not something that the council had to do, and shows that we do continue at Breckland to strive to be the best possible organisation that we can be. I think it's very valuable that we have an external look, and I look forward to the full report coming to council. I was interviewed in my capacity as chairman of governance and audit by the peer review, and the questioning, I have to admit, was extremely rigorous. So I don't doubt that the process has been extremely thorough.
Thanks, Chairman. So yeah, just to expand for colleagues, it is completely voluntary. There is no requirement for councils to open their doors and allow individuals from other councils to come and look in every single nook and cranny and ask questions to anybody, in which myself and the chief executive have no influence and ability to stop them before the individual responds. And actually, it's a really important activity for us in local government to ensure that we are striving to continuously improve. Colleagues across this chamber will have been interviewed by Councillor Peter Fleming, the leader of Sevenoaks District Council, Councillor Darren Rodwell, the leader of Barking and Dagenham London Council, two really successful leaders who will not mince their words, will be immensely upfront, and they are not conservatives. They are Conservative and Labour leaders, well regarded across the sector, as well as those senior officers. And it's a really important process which reinforces that Breckland is an open council, that we are absolutely continuously willing to change, adapt, transform to ensure that every resident and business across Breckland can thrive.
Councillor Stuart Terry.
Thank you, Chair. A recent report shows that 14% of Breckland residents are already in fuel poverty, with the figure likely to increase as the cost of fuel increases. For many in Breckland, heating oil is the primary source of domestic fuel, but there exists no price cap, unlike gas and electricity fuels. There have been significant cost increases for heating oil. Will you support the campaign to introduce a price cap on heating oil and lobby the government, assuming we have one, to introduce this?
Chairman, thanks. Councillor Webb has updated members back in November of last year and again in February and again in April, making them aware of schemes and activities across not just the county but nationally of support offered to families and households. At that point, as the last update from the Chancellor of the day announced for energy provision, and you've heard Councillor Cowan talk around over £6 million in those grants back to residents, I have written to the then Chancellor to make them aware of rural oil provisions and the challenge around that. And I'm still waiting a response, Councillor Terry, but that letter has already gone off to the Chancellor some weeks ago.
Are there any more questions? Because we're running out of time. Councillor Burke.
Actually, I think it might be Councillor Jeremy before me, but if he has a question.
Councillor Jeremy.
Yeah, I've saved you there, Chairman. Sam, the Norwich Western Link Road has shot up in price again and will now cost £251 million. And Norfolk taxpayers alone are going to be paying £38 million upfront and a further £30 million in likely borrowing costs. Breckland Council has previously indicated support for this project, but do you agree it is now time to pull the plug on this financially irresponsible and environmentally destructive road?
Thanks, Chairman, for the question from the member from Thetford, and I'm sure if he speaks to his colleagues at the northern part of the district, this is a vital piece of infrastructure for those communities across, not just Breckland, but the wider position of Norfolk. Norfolk County Council made their cabinet decision earlier this week or last in relation to the continuation of that project activity. And just to reinform and reaffirm, Chairman, that it would not be appropriate for me to go and dictate to another sovereign body what they should be doing around their activities. And in turn, I wouldn't expect the County Council to be telling me what to do. But in relation to Breckland's support through what the local ward members and division members from the County Council have said, I'm pleased that activity is moving forward to protect residents and businesses across the northern part of Breckland.
Councillor Burke, we've got a short question, please.
I've got another 5 questions, so you want a short one? Okay, I will follow up on Councillor Gilbert's problems with his trees, and I would like to request that we evaluate the carbon impact of planting trees that don't actually suck up any carbon. I mean, it's well known that the initial part of tree planting actually is carbon negative. So can I have a commitment that we will actually report on the actual carbon impact of our tree planting programme?
Chairman, as much as I'm grateful for Councillor Burt trying to inflate my ego that I know what carbon emission every tree sucks up, I take my advice from the Woodland Trust as one of our partners in relation to that. I will ask officers to raise that with the Woodland Trust, but if it's something which they haven't got in their skill set, I would not want to waste officer time and cost to the taxpayer by looking at that type of activity. As much as I applaud his concerns around that, I think Councillor Gilbert's comments around what that does by tree planting, creating beautiful places and spaces is some of those important positions of tree planting as well.
Thank you, everyone. We're now moving on to item 8. These are minutes for information only. The following minutes are for members' information only. Members would have had or will have the opportunity to ask questions or raise points of accuracy on these minutes at the relevant committee meetings. The recommendations on the minute number 56 of 22 of the Cabinet minutes will be considered under item 10. Are members happy for these sets of minutes to be noted?
There's a point of order, please. For the best part of a year, I've been stopped from asking questions at this point.
Yep.
So I'm allowed to talk now, am I?
Your point of order.
Right. I've tried to address this issue a number of times. I've received no substantial reason. Standing order number 5, order of business, specifically 5.1K states, on reports of the cabinet or committees, a member of the council may ask the leader or cabinet member any question without notice. That's it, this section.
Councillor Burt, the correct forum to raise questions is in respect of the actual, is to the actual committee where the minutes come from. And that's, I've got nothing to add to that.
Right, moving on. So are members happy for these 4 sets of minutes to be noted? To note the unconfirmed minutes of the cabinet meeting held on the 6th of June 2022. Members are asked to note that the recommendations on amendment number 5622 will be discussed at item 10. To note the unconfirmed minutes of the overview and scrutiny committee held on the 26th of May 2022. To note the confirmed meetings of the planning committee meeting held on the 10th of May 2022, and to note the unconfirmed minutes of the planning committee held on the 7th of June 2022. Agree. Members are asked to note that this report, this is under item 9, that this report was considered at the Governance and Audit Committee on the 23rd of June, where recommendations to full council were agreed. Could I ask Councillor Phil Callan, the Executive Member for Finance and Revenue and Benefits, to present the report and then propose and quote the recommendations which can be found on pages 55 of the agenda pack.
Thank you, Chairman. And colleagues, as you've heard, this report was presented recently to the Governance and Audit Committee, and it was that committee's agreement that the recommendations in the report be referred unaltered to Council. Unfortunately, our new accountancy manager, Matthew Fernandez-Graham, who with the finance team has pulled this report together for your consideration, is unable to be here due to family reasons. As we've discussed this at Governance and Audit, therefore, I would like to recommend to full council the following. That full council approves the actual 2021/22 prudential indicators within this report. And secondly, to note the Treasury Management Annual Report for 21/22 at Appendix B and Appendix C. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder to that proposal, please? Councillor Borrett. The recommendations are to approve the actual 2021 and 22 prudential indicators within this report, to note the Treasury Management Annual Report for 2021 and 22 at Appendix B and Appendix C. All in favour, please raise your hand.
Any questions?
Sorry, my apologies. Any questions? Councillor Burt.
Thank you. Might be allowed to speak this time. So since this report was written, the Bank of England governor has given an even more pessimistic economic outlook. Does this change anything in the report? For example, I was looking at the risks on page on 63. We're holding a very significant amount of money, £40 million plus, which is returning just 0.29%, while inflation's at 9%. So in other words, the value of our money is depreciating. Now, I appreciate that what we're being asked to do here is approve the prudential indicators, and I'm relatively content to do so. but I would like to see a cross-check to other sources in the future, and that was offered at the governance and audit, rather than relying exclusively on our linked asset report.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Burt. And I can agree with you that that was discussed at the Governance and Audit Committee. However, this report, as you're seeing it as it stands, is a report as a status quo at the time it was issued. Looking ahead, things may well be different, and therefore, as you rightly say, other indicators may well be considered.
Any other questions? No. I would then ask to all in favour, raise your hands. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. These recommendations have now been approved. Item 10. Members are asked to note that this report was considered at the Cabinet meeting on the 6th of June 2022, where the recommendations to full council were agreed. Could I ask Councillor Phil Cowan, the Executive Member for Finance, Revenue and Benefits, to present the report and then propose and quote the recommendations, which can be found on page 78 of the agenda pack.
Thank you, Chairman. We've reached that time in our reporting cycle where we can now look back over the... Oh, fine, good, all right. I'll start again. We've reached that time in our reporting cycle where we can now look back over the 12 months and confirm the position at the end of Q4 that has been maturing over the past year. Members will recall that at the end of Q1, the very first part of the process, we were forecasting we may need a contribution from the general fund of £531 million to achieve a balanced budget. And at the end of Q2, that had reduced to 398 million. And thus, at the end of Q4, the contribution that you can see in these papers is now reduced to £25 million. Given the year that we as a council have been working through in the wake of the pandemic, I believe that this is a testament to all that Team Breckland has achieved over the past 12 months. Members will be aware of the efficiencies programme that has been implemented, the development from the efficiencies target to the Evolve programme, the change in working practices through WorkSmart that have resulted because of the remodelling of Elizabeth House. All of the above and more have enabled us to hone down the potential deficit reported to the relatively small amount that we are reporting today. The report before you identifies the variations in the revenue account, shows the level of efficiencies achieved and highlights the underspends in the capital programme, and they're explained in table 2, the variances. Whilst these variances may seem substantial, there are no serious issues that should be of concern, and the detail is contained in that report. Turning to the Treasury section, the tables and pie chart are again self-explanatory, but I would draw your attention to the slightly higher than normal liquidity position as a result of the profiling of large cash flows and the accounting rules associated with the reporting procedure. If there are any questions arising out of the report, the finance team and I, and Alison sitting at the back here, will endeavour to respond in a fulsome manner. Thank you, Chairman.
Are there any questions? Councillor Jeremy.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Phil, and thank you to the officers that responded to the queries that I raised at the Cabinet meeting. I was very grateful. I wanted to raise a further question about table 2 and the significant variances, and I was quite surprised about the total cost in relation to marketing and communications. As a council now, we're spending £200,000 on marketing and communications, and there was a reasonably significant variance there. So I suppose my question would be, why do we need to be spending so much money on marketing and communications, and what was the reason for the variance?
I was looking at the wrong page. I was looking at the other table. I couldn't find it. Yes, so the variance there, additional version of transforming Breckland. If you can recall, we have a magazine called Transforming Breckland, which is seen by not just members, but residents as an important tool for communicating with the residents about Breckland and what Breckland can and can't do. It's been the subject over many years as to whether that magazine is relevant, should be continued, should be discontinued, how it should be put together. So this time we took the decision to produce additional copies at different times of the year in order to inform residents, particularly in the wake of the pandemic and the rising cost of living and everything else. So I think it was a good thing to do. It is affordable. I know it's a variance, but it's something which actually the residents benefit from. And I think that's good to do. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Burt.
Thank you, Chairman. Comment first, please. So we had a brief discussion at Cabinet about inflation and interest rates, where I raised some concerns about possible shortfall created by inflation. And that might have consequences to us carrying forward the capital budget, which is what we're going to agree to do today, or that's what's proposed. And I suggested then that we needed a risk assessment. Now, I appreciate that what we've got in the agenda pack today is merely a copy and paste. But it would be useful in future if these sort of issues are raised at committees and cabinet, that we could have some supplementary information when it actually comes to the point of making the decisions. So that's just a comment. I've got a question, really, which is on section 1.2. You say, progress against achieving our efficiencies has been strong, and yet we've only achieved half or just over half of the target, and we've abandoned 25% of our prospective of savings. To me, this sounds rather like the outgoing Boris Johnson definition of strong performance. Now, it's a key part of our balanced budget, these efficiency savings. We have to save millions in the Evolve programme. If we can't do this now, is that million that we have to save realistic?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Burt. So perhaps I can touch on your first comment. As it was made very clear at Cabinet, the whole point of the Q4 performance report is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a report of what's happened in the past 12 months. And the inflation that was accounted for is the inflation that was encountered during that time period. Looking ahead is a different topic altogether. This is a statement of fact at the end of Q4. Looking ahead, we will obviously have to take into account all considerations in putting forward any of our proposals. But I would remind you that whilst inflation is running at a particularly high level at the moment, there is every indication that inflation is a blip. Until we know it's not a blip, we cannot do any more than we are doing at the present time. I'm speaking, Councillor Burt, if you give me the courtesy. Thank you. As far as your comment about only achieving 54% efficiency, I think that's an enormous undertaking that we've carried out. But during the last 12 months, the efficiency programme has had to change. So in line with best practice, we don't just stick to our guns and say we need to achieve 100% of 100%. We actually look at what's going forward, how we're going to respond to changing circumstances. And as a result, the Evolve programme has arrived because some of the items that we were looking to achieve through efficiencies over the last few years have become irrelevant. Hence, we have the Work Smart programme, and the Work Smart programme is delivering exactly what it said it would do on the tin. We have a building which is fit for purpose for not just now, but for years to come. We have a workforce who find the opportunities to work within that environment significantly better than they've had in the past. As a result, our efficiency programme is on track. And as you can see from this report, We do plan to make additional savings in the coming 12 months. Thank you.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, Chair. Phil, can I, as we said at Cabinet, can I congratulate you actually and the team on producing both the data, the performance report, and actually managing the performance of this council over what is quite remarkable circumstances economically to such a tight conclusion as at the end of March 2022. But I'd like to add, and Councillor Burt, I'm just about to make a joke, just so you know. I'm delighted, Councillor Burt, that you have picked up on the fact that our cash return is so low, and therefore presumably implying that actually we need to do more with our commercial property portfolio to make sure that we're producing the revenues that our taxpayers want during these difficult economic circumstances. And I'm also delighted, Councillor Burt, because you will know the two-year and the five-year economic data for inflation moving forwards, rather than looking back, which the OBR do, that actually the two-year rate is currently about 2.6% and the five-year rate is about 2.1%. So from that, So just in conclusion, Phil, I think your point and Councillor Burt's point about inflation, we do need to take account of, but I do agree with you absolutely that the markets in particular believe this is a short-term blip rather than the long-term trend.
Are there any more questions? Can I have a proposer or a seconder for that proposal?
I haven't actually proposed it yet, Chairman.
Well, according to the sheet you have. So,
Agenda item 10 on page 78 contains a series of amendments, the first of which is that the report and appendix be noted. That's happened. But there are three recommendations to full council. One, that the capital budgets and associated funding sources of £1,932,375 be carried forward into 22-23 to support projects in progress. Secondly, that the revised capital budget and associated funding for the 22-23 capital programme as detailed in Appendix B be approved. And finally, that the final capital outturn and funding for years 21-22 as detailed in Appendix C be approved. Thank you, Chairman.
can I have a seconder for that proposal, please? Councillor Crane, thank you.
Move the recommendation, Chairman.
All in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? No. Thank you. These recommendations have been approved. Item number 11, nominations for committee and other seats. Do we have any nominations for committee and other seats? Councillor Kraus.
Probably Klaus. There you go. Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, due to ill health, Hilary Bushells having to step away from a couple of committees she has been serving very, very well. So I have the duty, please, to replace Hilary Bushell with Paul Plummer on Overview and Scrutiny Commission. And she's also a member of the Planning Committee, and I am asking that Paul Plummer will replace Hilary Bushell on planning as well. With regard to outside bodies, I'm informed that we need to add the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance as an outside body, and currently Gordon Bambridge attends that, and Sam Chapman-Allen is the substitute member, and that will remain. We've also been informed that the rules of engagement from the Norfolk Rivers Internal Drainage Board are being altered, such that we will have one member And so we will have Gordon Bambridge as our one member and Bill Borrett as our substitute member. But that's going to be ratified, I'm told, by Gordon within the next couple of weeks. So that's as it stands at the moment, Chairman. Thank you.
Terry? Roger? He's not here. Bill, okay. Tim?
No changes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Amendments to the Constitution. I'm not aware of any amendments. There are not. Thank you. And on item 13, I have no urgent items for discussion. Councillor Kybert.
Thank you, Chairman. If I just may put a word of support in for the presentation to follow from Norfolk Museums, that will include the community tree nursery that's being established and wider environmental links between Dereham and Gresson Hall, so that hopefully a number of members will find that very interesting.
Right. Thank you. Before I close this meeting, I would like to thank everybody who's taken the time to watch this meeting via YouTube and remind members to remain in the room if they so wish for the presentation from the Norfolk Museum Service, which will take place immediately after this meeting.